Hey everyone, my name is Gabe. Currently, I look after the DeFi ecosystem at Mantle. What Mantle is a couple of things. So first and foremost, it's a DAO treasury, one of the largest in the industry right now. And we also have a Ethereum Layer 2 network based on the OP stack. So fully EVM compatible environment. We have a whole ecosystem of like DeFi applications, Ts, and also GameFi and stuff like that. So it's very familiar environment to anyone coming from any other L2s. And yeah, we're very builder focused. We want to grow the Ethereum ecosystem. We're also very close partners with Bybit Exchange as our largest stakeholder. And yeah, that's all about Mantle in a nutshell.
Cool. I'm Tristan, co-founder of Backpack and Mad Lads. So we have an exchange, we have a wallet, and then we have the Mad Lads NFT community. I have a question for you. So on the L2 front, I mean, obviously we've seen this explosion of L2s across the field, and I think a lot of the focus now is these guys finding differentiation for each other. And I guess kind of to the topic of mass adoption, like how is Mantle thinking about being the place where people actually go to versus the variety of other L2s that exist right now?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess mass adoption is a very tricky topic in general. I think in the past few years, we haven't seen that much new users coming into the space, to be fair. It's mostly like the same amount of money just rotating between ecosystems. But what sorts of makes Mantle different is that in the beginning, we were very DeFi focused. So it's a very similar ecosystem like Optimism, Arbitrum. But I think one of the main advantages that we have over the other ecosystem is that we have the ability to back a lot of these teams, especially from a financial standpoint, in terms of like the grants and investments. But I think what's more interesting is that most of the time, a lot of applications look for TVL, liquidity, to bootstrap like certain markets, especially DeFi, DEXs, lending markets. And so Mantle is able to provide a lot of that liquidity, especially on hard assets, right? Like USDT, USDC, and also Ethereum. So we have a whole burgeoning ecosystem of DeFi applications. We also have a liquid staking protocol that is very Mantle aligned. So we have our own LST called METH, which we've been pushing as
METH?
METH.
Oh
yes,
my God,
METH.
guys.
METH or METH, whichever you prefer, but I prefer METH.
So do you think that is enough to because okay, maybe do you think it will be winner take all in the L2 space? Do you think there will just be enough people to use the many L2s that exist today, or do you think there's going to be a few that are basically going to take all the liquidity and all the users? And if that's the case, like, do you think Mantle will be able to achieve that through this angle on the DeFi side?
I think it will definitely not be a winner-takes-all scenario. I feel like there will be definitely a few top chains that will accumulate most of the TVL. But I do think there's a lot of opportunities for other smaller chains that are more application-specific. We've already seen some of that, especially with like those layer 2s, which are maybe like perpetual DEXs, like Hyperliquid, and stuff like that. I think for Mantle, we want to focus on the DeFi side of things, especially the base users, right? I think without a strong foundation of these kinds of crypto-native users, it's very hard to build towards mass adoption. So I think right now we're in the stage where the network is just over a year old, and we've sort of been building that foundation of applications and also DeFi native users, right? But yeah, it's definitely, we haven't reached to the scale where we have expanded towards mass adoption.
Yeah, and I think in that light, TVL might not be the best metric in general, because at the end of the day, adoption comes through applications that people want to use. Like, yeah, you can get adoption through financial incentives, but you kind of end up with the fallacy that we saw with a lot of the L2s where they had all this activity when people wanted to get points or whatnot for the token, and then once the token was launched, everyone just moves on to the next one. So I think one thing on the chain side that I'm always paying attention to is what is being built that could actually interest both the crypto native crowd and potentially have people who aren't in crypto come in and participate and try that out. And I'd be curious, are there some stuff on Mantle that you look at and you think, oh, this is pretty new or pretty interesting that we think could have that effect?
Yeah, I think mostly maybe from a financial standpoint, given that I'm mainly looking at like the DeFi ecosystem on Mantle. I think we've seen a lot of product market fit, especially with the DeFi dApps on Mantle, especially with like regions that are not, maybe have like based in like an authoritarian regime, where they don't have access to a lot of these like financial applications. Countries like Argentina and countries like Turkey. I think, especially from the DeFi front, we've seen a lot of adoption from those regions, given that their their local currency is depreciating heavily due to like mass inflation, hyperinflation, and people there don't have access to a lot of these opportunities that we in more developed nations have. And I think that is where I see a lot of like the use case right now, especially on like that front. But maybe to switch to pose the question to you, right? Especially coming from more on the application layer, from like Backpack and sort of Mad Lads, right? How do you sort of think about mass adoption? What's your mental model there?
Yeah, sure. First, I do want to say I think that was a really honest and truthful answer as far as where do users come from, and I think DeFi can be useful, and I think for us in first world countries, we tend to forget that sometimes because we have such good financial infrastructure and we can tap into it, but there is a lot of the world that can't. So I actually do think you don't necessarily need the next Instagram on your L2 if you do become the DeFi layer for some of these countries. So I think that was a good answer. The reason I was ragging on TVL a little bit is because I feel like it's if you're in a test and the teacher asks you, oh, what should I grade you guys on? And the students get to choose what they get graded on. And I think TVL is kind of that as a metric for chains. But the way we think about adoption at Backpack is, I'd say, multifaceted. On one end of the spectrum, probably the most important end of the spectrum is just product. Like, you have to build compelling products that people want to use. If you don't have that, doesn't matter how many incentives or how much money you throw at the problem, you're not going to break through to the other side. If you create truly compelling products that people want to use, you'll achieve adoption regardless of tokens or incentives or who is the influencer that is behind all these different things. I think a good example of that is Robinhood, where basically they just made it so that people could have easy access to the equity markets without having to have these minimum deposits that you need in interactive brokers and whatnot. And you see that by their waiting list having over 1 million people before they even launch the application. So the paragon for us is certainly product. And that's where the majority of the focus and energy goes from our team, both on the wallet side and on the exchange side. So you have to win on that if you want to make a difference. But there are nuances in crypto that are quite different from Web 2 and from other spaces, which is that we're all building very much in the open in a way that you don't see in any other industry. Basically, the entirety of our industry runs on Twitter. And if you're not drawing attention to the things that you're doing through Twitter, it's going to be very difficult for anyone to give a fuck about what you're building in the first place. So what that does is you actually have really tight feedback cycles. If you are posting the things that you're doing, which you should be if you're in crypto, then you have people that are very quickly giving you feedback on the things that you're doing. And a lot of times that feedback's terrible and you should disregard it. But if you don't have an open mind and you're not paying attention to these feedback cycles, you actually miss out on a lot of value and a lot of upside. And so I think that the nuance in crypto is, yeah, you need to really build a good product, but you need to lean into this building in the open aspect, and then also making sure that the crypto natives, who are the people using crypto right now, give you feedback by trying your product and listening to their feedback. And then I think the third thing is, if you get those two right, then you might have the possibility of breaking into this mass adoption segment. And at the moment, I agree with your comment earlier, we're mostly just serving the crypto natives. There are very few things right now that are going into the mainstream. I think the only thing in recent crypto history, which, to be fair, moves very fast and is very short-lived, but is meme coins was probably the only thing recently that broke out of the crypto native bubble, and it actually just made a lot of people lose money. And so those participants might be out of the market for a bit. So that's my sense on it.
Yeah, it's definitely been a tough market for like retailers, especially. I think we've seen this during like the COVID bull run as well, where a lot of people had a lot of stimulus money that came into the space, wanted to speculate. I think we've done not so great of a job in highlighting the real innovations that are happening. A lot of the retail users think crypto markets in general are just like a very hyper speculative space where they can just gamble away their money and hopefully make 10x their amount. Whereas like we see so many applications that are changing the space today that are not even in their radar, right? They don't even know about these applications. They only know about, meme coins, NFTs, and which influencer is getting this new NFT, Bored Apes, and some stuff like that. Which,
to be fair, I mean, the world is hyper-gamblifying. It is moving in the direction of where it's very difficult for you to follow the traditional paths of your parents or your grandparents and be able to establish yourself and your family and your life. And I think one of the second-order effects of that is that people are just going all in. And it's either going to work out or they're going to end up zeroed out. And you see that, for example, with the legalization of sports betting in the United States, where it's a bit sad to see, but I think it is a sign of the times that people are gambling much, much more than they did in the past. And I think that will have second-order effects in crypto. And I don't want my prior comment to be a complete sort of roast of meme coins, because I do think the odds, at least at certain segments of the meme coin cycle, were much better for participants than if they're doing parlays or they're buying lotto tickets. So I do want people here who are building for this speculative nature to know that it is a real valid use case of crypto, and I think it might be the one that is bringing in the most people at this moment in time, so not to completely disregard it.
No, yeah, for sure. I think there is some fun in it, but I think it's sort of taken the stage and overshadowed everything that we've built into just like, meme coins.
But that's our fault.
Yeah, that kind of is our fault.
At the end of the day, we're here building things, and if meme coins are taking the spotlight, we need to be building better things, or communicating the things we're building in better ways, or putting them in front of the right people. I think market dynamics happen for a reason, and to try and go against those things or say that the market is wrong is a really perhaps dangerous approach to take.
Agreed. Now, you sort of, with that approach that you mentioned earlier regarding like the product first, right? Now you have quite a number of products here, right? You have the Backpack Exchange, the Backpack app, you have the Mad Lads NFT community. How do you sort of tie that together and like package that? What's the grander plan here?
Yeah, so we started with the wallet. We started with the on-chain group of users. Essentially, the wallet is your portal into the on-chain universe, and anyone that's doing on-chain activities needs a wallet. And that's why we started with a wallet, because we wanted to have something where if we built a good product, we could get distribution without being beholden to third parties. So that covered the on-chain side of the world. And after the collapse of FTX, we realized that there was certainly a gap in the exchange market, because a lot of the users of FTX moved on to other international exchanges, but there was perhaps some mistrust. And if you think of the exchange space sort of as a continuum of, on one side, those that are hyper compliant and those that have taken more of the Wild West crypto native approach, there is certainly a middle pathway to be taken in the regard of caring about compliance and licensing and KYC and all these things that regulators are starting to care a lot more about, while also still having a small, nimble, crypto-native team that could build products quickly. So the exchange came out of that with having the right skill sets to do those things, and the realization that, well, if we have the on-chain users on the wallet, the off-chain users in the centralized exchange, we can really create interesting dynamics between the two that allow people to have one application through which they use all of crypto, which is a really nice place to be in, because we don't have to hand people off when they go and trade DeFi or use, Friendtech or OpenSea or whatever it is. They're still within our same product, especially in the mobile app where you have both of the products within the same interface. So I think those are the the essential coverage of the entirety of the crypto world. And then the way to think of the Mad Lads at this point is this autonomous, decentralized marketing engine where they are perhaps the most active community in crypto, and I measure that just through crypto Twitter activity and how loud and active they are. And what they do is they grab anything that we build on the product side and they take a megaphone to it and they amplify it and they make sure that people see that the things we're doing are cool or that there are users that care about it, which then bring in more people to try the things that we're building. So it's turned out to be, it's been very serendipitous. We didn't have this plan from the beginning, but it's turned out to be a very wholesome ecosystem with these 3 different segments that we've worked on.
Very interesting. Yeah, I've been following your growth of Mad Lads and Backpack for quite a while, and I'm very impressed by how far you guys have sort of progressed over the years. And I think one question maybe towards the Mad Lads community, right? You say in terms of on a product focus, there's always that feedback loop with the users. Is the user always right in this sense?
Oh, no, absolutely not. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't care about their opinion. And I think one mistake a lot of people in crypto make is that if you're actually working in the industry, people sometimes think they're better than crypto retail, and they think that they should only interact with those that are also working in the industry and not just those that are participating as holders or as whatever capacity outside of a professional capacity. And I think that's a huge mistake, because I don't know about you guys, but I was crypto retail at one point, and the thing that I wanted most in the world was to have a group of people that were also in crypto that I could interact with on a daily basis, and that founders of projects would answer questions. And that was really hard to come by in 2017 for me. And so one thing that I think we did very different with Mad Lads and Backpack is that we never felt like there was an us and them. It was just all of us together on this mission of making crypto larger than it already is. And I think our community really felt that. Like they realized we uniquely cared about each and every single one of them that was within our Discord and our Telegram that was spending time with us. And there's a lot of value that you get in that, because you give these people who haven't had a chance to break in professionally into the space an opportunity to express themselves. And if you do give them that opportunity, that expression tends to really bolster whatever you're building. And then you have these essential super fans of your product that will go out and make you relevant in a way that you wouldn't be able to if you only had other crypto professionals behind you.
Oh yeah, very interesting. I think, but how do you sort of filter that, right? Because sometimes some users may have something that they are not too happy about, but they make a very, let's say, bad opinion about it.
Well, in the same way that I have relationships with everyday people, like you only treat people respectfully if they treat you respectfully, and you disregard people who are disrespectful, and you don't bow to mob rule. Like one strict rule in crypto for any founders here is mob rule will take you to no good end. So if your community is trying to bully you into something, it's very likely not the right direction for you to go. There are times where you should listen and you might have to adapt, but you don't want to train your community into thinking that if they all gang up on you, they can get their way. It's the same as your interactions with regular people, except it's online and it's digital. And so, yeah, don't bow to mob rule. I've seen it bring a lot of projects to bad places in crypto. You as the founders should have the vision of the thing that you want to bring out into the world, and you should stick to it, and you should update your priors if there's better information than what you have, but you shouldn't let third parties be the deciders of what you are doing.
Yeah, because sometimes there's times where the users themselves are oftentimes financially incentivized by whatever happens with the project. So how do you balance that, right? Like, how do you prioritize the users' demands while also focusing on the product itself?
So we ended up in a little bit of a unique position, because when we launched, before we even launched the product, we started curating our community. We had a very viral moment when we first came out with this concept of XNFTs. We had a Twitter that was called xnft.gg, and no one knew what XNFTs were, but there was a tremendous amount of curiosity. And that was bringing a lot of engagement to everything that we did in socials. And we started leaning into that with memes. And essentially by having a private Discord, we were able to curate who the first 500-600 people were that entered into our community. And we spent enough time there with them that those people became aligned with us and our mission at a personal level, at a level of their heart, essentially, not at the level of financial gain or financial incentives. And so once we expanded this community to whatever, how many tens of thousands of people there are now, those first 500-600 people are still the backbone. Like, those guys who got those whitelists that long ago are still holders of Mad Lads. They're still the bearers of the culture that we created and that we shared with them back then. And so if you have enough people who are torchbearers of your culture, they will then train new entrants into your community, and they'll very quickly kick out people who are there for the wrong reasons, and they won't make them feel welcome. And you kind of want that, because you don't want to be the one that's having to filter all the time, but you want your community to do that for you. So I think that's the special thing that we had, where we had a lot of people who truly cared because we cared about them and we spent time with them, and they've carried forth this idea of supporting us beyond financial gain.
Yeah, I think that's definitely hard to find. Aligning interests between communities outside of just, if token goes up or the NFT price goes up, then they're happy, right? But how do you make these people happy in a way where when you succeed, then they succeed?
Yeah, I mean, crypto's just way too financially driven. Everyone thinks it's about token price, about money. The truth is, most people are looking for a place to belong, and that sounds cheesy, but especially in this digital time when most people are online all the time, they just want a place where they can find like-minded people that they can share time with, that they can share about their life. And if you're able to create that for them, you'll have their loyalty, and it won't really matter if you're giving them money or not. And it takes time. It's really one of those things of do things that don't scale. Like, we wouldn't have been able to generate that unless we spent hundreds of hours in the Discord with these people and got to know them and taught them how we were thinking about the world. But I think it's really worth it in the long run because it gives you what we've been able to achieve today.
No, yeah, very interesting. I think that's very interesting to hear, especially from the application side. Like, for us, on the infrastructure side, it's a bit different. We have this whole ecosystem of applications where we basically need to choose, like, who do we support, which founders are the ones that can take this product to, like, the next level and stuff like that, right? Because, like, on the infra level, it's a general purpose layer, right? Anyone can build anything, but what we want to find people who can lead projects, lead products to, like, the next, 10 to 100, right? And I think that's, like, the challenge or the differentiation between, like, from an application level and more on the infra level.
So how do you go about that when you look at the spectrum of all the people who are building on this chain? How do you decide which ones you can invest your time into and which ones you can't? What are signs that you look for a good founder or a good team or a good community?
Yeah, for sure. That's a good question. So oftentimes we get a lot of deal flow for either investments or grants where new teams and developers are building new stuff. A lot of the times it's very marginal upgrades of existing applications, and it's not that attractive. Maybe it's like the 100th Uniswap fork that changes, like, one small thing, right? So I think what we want to find is something novel, something interesting, that is really solving a problem that no one else is attempting to solve. I think that's one of the key differentiations, is that whenever we talk to founders, it's like, okay, what are you really trying to solve? Is this problem really big enough? And does this have the potential to go a long way? Does this team have the potential to take this project to the next level?
Yeah, I also think in general in crypto, there are so many folks with short time horizons where their goal is to make money fast. And there is obviously issues with how fast founders get liquidity in this space, that when you run into people who are thinking on much longer time horizons, it's a much more compelling case to want to work with them or help them or get behind them. So that's one of the things I've ran into, especially doing, like, listings for the exchange. You meet these teams who are on their third or fourth token, and you're like, oh, okay, I see what you're up to. Like, this is clearly not you trying to build something impactful. You're just trying to get as many tokens out into the world as you can.
No, yeah, exactly. We encounter that a lot. it's really telling of a founder's character of how they sort of approach new products and new ideas, right? You don't want this founder to be hopping into the next project or the next narrative whenever the market shifts. We want someone that can really focus down on a specific problem that is big enough to scale. So I think that's very difficult to find. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. You don't get many founders or individuals that can take a project to the next level.
So we have about 9 minutes left. I'd love to open up to Q&A if anyone has questions they'd like to ask. I mean, if not, we can keep sort of yammering up here, yapping. But does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? Yeah?
Hey, yeah. I was just curious if both of you guys are interested in the future of Web3 gaming and what your thoughts were about it.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, for sure. So I think Web3 gaming, there's probably some differentiations to make, right? Like what makes a game Web3? Is it because there's a financial aspect to the game? Do users earn from the game? I think the core of every game is that the game has to be fun for it to get users. If it's not fun, then there's no point to have like the financial element to it anyway. I think oftentimes people try to the financial incentive. There shouldn't need to be a financial incentive for people to play the game. If you're paying someone to play the game, you're just paying them. You're just renting the liquidity of the users, right? After the rent is over, then they just leave. Like we've seen in every like regular game or Web2 game per se, that it's a very user-focused approach. Users don't need to be incentivized because the game itself is fun. They want to play the game. But yeah, I do think that there is a handful of teams that are building quite interesting games in the space. But I think there needs to be some sort of realignment of incentives or the priorities, right, for these teams to sort of build a game that is fun.
So this is what I view as the problem of Web3 gaming, is that games are incredibly hard to build. A good game that gets a good user base is probably one of the hardest things to build in time and energy and the size of the team needed and the variety of the disciplines needed to get that game out into the market. And so to his point of the game having to be good enough that people want to play it without the financial incentives, to really build a game like that, especially in today's day and age where there are so many AAA phenomenal games and amazing consoles and gaming PCs that you can access all these things on, is that it can take you 3 to 5 years, and crypto moves like this, right? Like everything is so cyclical, narrative, meme driven. Whatever's happening at that moment in time captures people's attention. And as a game, it's incredibly difficult to maintain people's attention throughout the entire period through which you build this game. So either you build the entire game and you only start marketing when you're about to launch, in which case you might as well maybe have built a regular Web 2 game versus a Web 3 game, or you somehow have to try and maintain people's attention through this whole period while also competing with the largest game studios in the world. I do think there is an angle for gaming to work in crypto. So I grew up playing this game called RuneScape. Spent way too much of my childhood on that game. I would have loved for the ability to have, I got this thing called a party hat. I would have loved to have an NFT of my party hat. I would have loved to have permanence of these things. I would, even if Jagex shut down and everything disappeared, to have those memories encoded somewhere that would exist forever, I think as a gamer would be really special to me. So I think there are aspects that make a lot of sense, but I think it's probably one of the hardest things to pull off correctly in crypto, just because of how fast the industry moves and how cyclical it is, where you may start in a bull market and by the time you're getting close to launch, it's just absolute bear and no one cares anymore. And then to the financial incentive point, I do think the beauty of crypto is it allows you to incentivize behavior globally in a way that you can't do with, say, dollars or most fiat currencies. So there is something there. But I think it only works if the sinks are greater than the faucets, and then that only works if there's enough people who are truly compelled to play the game because they enjoy it.
Yeah, I think just adding to his point about how hard or difficult games are, or how much resources are required to create a game, right? Like in the gaming industry, game studios take years to actually craft out like a game that is really, really good. And even then, sometimes it does not even do that well. So like you take like 3 to 4 years, and how much resources can you spend to last those 3 to 4 years to actually create a game that is really good? And I think in the Web3, it's very difficult. We've seen a few like AAA gaming studios that are actively creating a game. Like they started building like a few years ago, and right now we haven't seen much of it, to be honest. And yeah, I think it's just very difficult in that sense.
I mean, the other problem is like traditional gamers hate crypto for some reason. There's just this deep disdain for crypto, for NFTs. And so if the use case is that you'll bring in traditional gamers into crypto with Web3 gaming, I think that's going to be difficult unless you're able to get over that hump. And I don't think there's enough people in crypto to sort of take these huge games to market in the way that they need to go to market to be successful. Any other questions? Anyone like to ask? Right here.
Oh, hi there. I'm just curious about both of your thoughts, one from infrastructure level and one from like application level, on what interoperability might look like in this cycle, because I guess most consider DeFi summer hasn't really started yet, and most liquidity is in Bitcoin. But you've already seen there's like Bitcoin layer 2s and Ethereum layer 2s, and there's like layer 3s, of course. And do you think it'll be just as fragmented as last cycle, where each ecosystem has its own? Well, I guess users kind of have to like choose their ecosystem to kind of like abide to and pick the apps that are on those ecosystems, or do you think the cycle will be different?
Yeah, I think on the infra layer, we've seen quite a lot of innovations, especially on the interoperability front. Usually, for you to get to one chain to another, right now it's relatively cheap and pretty fast. Security definitely is always a concern. I think what Layer 0 XLR Wormhole is doing is a really good value add to the ecosystem. But I think the ideal scenario for a lot of application these days, right, is that the users won't even need to know what's like happening on the back end, right? They just want to know, okay, how can I use my money? Where can I use my money? And that's it, right? You don't really need to know like, oh, you're bridging from Arbitrum all the way to Optimism, and then you got a stake in this protocol and do what and what not, right? I think all that needs to be abstracted away. But I think in terms of interoperability, we are making quite a lot of progress on that front, to be honest. But yeah, definitely fragmented liquidity is still a thing. I don't think anyone has really solved for fragmented liquidity yet, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think exchanges are still by far the largest interoperability protocols in crypto, without a doubt. I think that I have issues with the fragmentation that we see with so many different chains and networks popping up, which is why I've been a strong Solana advocate since 2020, because I think this monolithic approach where you just have one place that you can plug into everything that is happening in that single place is very powerful. That being said, I also think crypto is very narrative driven again. And if interesting narratives pop up in different places, crypto participants will try and be there. And the infrastructure is certainly in a much better place than it was last cycle, with the things like he was describing that we're seeing with companies like Wormhole. And I also think we'll start seeing, perhaps, I could be wrong here, but my take is we'll probably start seeing less asset bridging and more message busing between chains. I think it's perhaps more efficient and might be able to abstract away some of the complexities for the users. So I think that's probably the direction some of this is going to be going in. But in general, as a user, I want to show up in one place with one wallet, click one button, and have access to the entire liquidity of that network and not have to, worry about sourcing from other places and hopping between networks. Okay, looks like we're just about out of time. Thank you everyone for listening to our unmoderated ramble. Thanks, Gabe.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.